the Biden team, which, by the way, I don't understand why he and the vice president and the leadership in the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and the DOJ aren't being impeached. In the Constitution that points out that the president is supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer. Well, the chief law enforcement officer is supposed to uphold federal law, and Title 8, Section 1182 of federal law states that nobody's supposed to enter the United States of America without proper documentation. And the executive branch, which is responsible for law enforcement and upholding the law, is not doing so. Why are they impeached on that?
Hi, I'm Scott Piotr with Costa Mesa Brief. Today I'm going to introduce to you Denice GaryPandol, who's a candidate for U.S. Senate for the state of California.
Thank you, Scott, so much. I appreciate you having me on today, and it's an honor to be with you and to greet the people of California. I would just be so greatly honored to represent them and help make California affordable again and help make California safe again and our nation.
Make it affordable again. And you got a long way to go.
Yes, sir, I do. But we can make that happen. Can we talk about that for a moment?
I'd like to hear it.
Okay. Scott, you know, there's a little thing that was passed into legislation in 1970 called NEPA. That's the National Environmental Policy Act.
So it's the national version of the California EPA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we've got to get rid of it. And I know that there are people in the United States Senate who will work with me, and in the House of Representatives who will work with me to overturn it. Now, when we overturn that, Scott, what we can do is we can begin to go after these bureaucracies like FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
And this will make things more affordable for us.
We're talking about making food more affordable to the working class people of California and America. It's tough. Times are tough right now for the people of this state. But there's food shortages on the horizon in America, and there's food shortages around the globe. But we can end the food shortages. You know, look at what our farmers, I talk to farmers up and down the state of California. I've been campaigning for 2 years. Farmers are plowing under their crops, Scott. Farmers are having to say to the people of California, we can't afford the water. We can't afford to turn on the water, and in many cases, bureaucracies in our state have turned off the water to our farmers. Look at our ranchers. I've got ranchers that I've talked to that are getting rid of their livestock because it's so expensive.
So this is all water related.
This is about water and bureaucrats, and this goes back to NEPA.
Okay.
And that piece of legislation from 1970 that was passed, the National Environmental Policy Act, that has created a multitude of bureaucracies. And our taxpayer dollars are paying people to sit in refrigerated offices with good salaries and lots of food to eat, to pass regulations that are literally, in some cases, bankrupting the very people that are growing our food, that are providing our dairy cows water. You know, California is the #1 dairy state in the nation.
Wait a second, we're better than Wisconsin?
Yes, sir. California provides over 2/3 of all the fruit and nuts that are eaten in our state, in our country, and around the world. California provides 1/3 to 1/2 of all the vegetables that we eat.
I take it they're not growing those in San Francisco or LA.
No, but if you travel up and down the state as I have done and talk to these people, you know, you see all this agricultural land. I mean, we are a state that's just filled with agriculture and livestock, and we are feeding our state and our country and our world, and it's a beautiful thing.
And the bureaucrats are making it difficult.
They're turning off our water. California Water Board, in some instances, turned off the water to farmers by 95%. I was at a...
How do they go from 100% to 5% and survive?
You know, let's talk about the California Water Board. You know, this is another bureaucratic agency, and we have got to get to a point where we get rid of NEPA, we get rid of these bureaucracies, because I want the people of California to know.
So if you got rid of NEPA, that would get rid of the California Water Board?
It would, well, not directly. There's not a direct line from getting rid of NEPA to getting rid of the California Water Board. No, no,
Okay.
sir. But it's a beginning.
Okay.
You've got to go after the federal legislation that laid the foundation and made it possible for all of these bureaucracies.
So it enabled these bureaucracies to form and to continue
Exactly,
to regulate.
like the EPA, which we need to get rid of. NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, created a foundation for bureaucracies to be established to regulate our lives. So the people in our state, taxpayer dollars, the working class, all classes of society are paying about $15,000 a year per household on regulations that flowed out of some legislation that was passed in 1970 called NEPA.
Okay,
What
so
I-
that's all the different agencies, that not necessarily just the water.
Right, exactly. I mean, this affects the nation.
Okay, so you
And affects California, but it affects the nation. And it's not just California that has
Right.
hefty food prices.
California is the worst of them, probably.
Right, exactly. And we grow a tremendous amount of food. We provide over 400 commodities to our state and to our nation and to our world. And those commodities help feed America. And so what we
In
need to
spite of
talk
the regulations.
well, it's making it increasingly difficult because farmers are plowing under their food crops and our ranchers are getting rid of their livestock, and in some states they're slaughtering them. So what we need to talk about is overturning these bureaucratic agencies, and we need to get legislation passed in Washington, D.C. that is going to mandate water infrastructure on an annual basis. If we just save 5% of the Sierra Nevada snowcap that melts every year, 5%, if we saved it in off-stream reservoirs and dams, etc., there'd be plenty of water for the people of our state, and we wouldn't have farmers going out of business because they can't afford to pay for water and have some truck bring in water because they can't have enough water turned on because some state bureaucracy is controlling their water. So let me just say this. It's illegal in the state of California for any farmer, rancher, or any citizen to have, for example, a rainwater capture system. That would be helpful. You know, the people of California need to rise up. The people of this state have passed 10 water bond issues, 10, over the last 25 years. It's 2023. And we've passed these 10 water bond issues. Taxpayers have spent $30 billion, and we haven't had one dam built since the 1980s.
So no additional storage for 30 years.
Right. And they've paid for it. Where is the $30 billion? Where is the water infrastructure? I was driving up to Hollister, California. I've been up and down this state. And I looked over to my left, and there's a sign that says Sites, S-I-T-E-S, Sites Reservoir. Well, where is Sites Reservoir, Scott? There hadn't even been a hole dug in the ground, right?
So there's a sign, it's coming soon?
No, it's just a sign that says Sites Reservoir, not so much as a hole dug. And I think that was passed in 2014. Think about that. So
They're still doing the environmental studies for NEPA.
right, exactly, for the EPA. And then we've got FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
You should be writing these down.
Well, that's okay. FERC just destroyed 4 dams in Siskiyou County. Now, you want to talk about
Wait a second, they got rid of storage.
They got rid of storage. That's
haven't
why
built any
Denice
new.
Gary-Pandol, who's running for United States Senate, and I'm the only one that's talking about making it mandatory that every year states that have insufficient water for their farmers and their ranchers have to build water storage, because we cannot have a food crisis in America as other countries are having, because you have to be able to feed your military and you have to be able to feed your people unless you want a revolution.
So you're going to regulate the regulators?
I don't want to regulate.
Or are you going to provide incentives
I want
instead?
to mandate water infrastructure. The money is there. The
Mandates are regulations.
Well, nevertheless, we've got to get water.
Just saying.
We've got to get water.
But you might provide big incentives instead of mandates.
We've got the money.
A carrot and a stick, right?
The money is available to build water storage.
We've approved it as voters.
Right. 10 water bond issues over 25 years. We've already spent $30 billion. We take that money and we build water infrastructure. I want to tell you what the Israelis are doing. The Israelis are building fog capture systems that are pulling the moisture right out of the air. We're having this interview in Irvine, California. When I walked outside the home of some good people that are allowing me to stay while I'm here in the Orange County area, my car was covered in dew. Moisture, which I don't normally see where I come from in Kern County. But anyway, that was interesting. It was wet. And I thought, fog capture systems, think about...
We can't even capture rainwater.
Right.
Now you want to capture fog. The Israelis are capturing fog in the desert.
And look what they're doing with it. They're selling it to people that have wanted to destroy their state and their people. But they're now selling water. They're selling water not only to Arabs, but they're selling water to places where people are dying of thirst. What a blessing. Think about the economic growth and prosperity for our state to have small business owners, entrepreneurs, build a business and develop these fog capture systems that could be sold here in California and around the globe to help people capture that water and have pure, clean drinking water or pure, clean water for their crops, for their ranches. Think about this. Think about this. Think about the Israelis having manufactured these mobile reclamation units. So when there's flooding in our state, by the way, there wouldn't have been all that flooding in the state of California if we had captured that water, if we had had the water infrastructure available to prevent that flooding from happening.
Right. It would have gone into storage instead of flooding.
Right, and then eventually found its way into the ocean. And by the way, the ocean doesn't need our water. The ocean doesn't need California water.
So I'm going to turn the corner. You mentioned Israel. Obviously, we're going through, some are saying, the beginning of World War III. But as a senator, you will have a big impact on foreign relations and things like treaties.
Yes, sir. My responsibility to approve them or not.
And exactly, to approve those treaties. Talk to us about our homeland security, because everybody's focused on it these days because of Israel. What's going on in Israel? What would you do as a senator? What other changes would you make to keep us safe?
Number one, so the Biden administration and the Democrats, the Democrats in the Senate and in the House have supported President Biden, his team, from relaxing the sanctions on Iran. They've relaxed the sanctions on Iran so much that Iran has been able to buy and sell rockets and drones, weaponized drones.
So the biggest thing that they're doing, of course, is oil, right? Because
we'll get to that.
They sell oil and they get money and they can do all
they're
these
selling
things.
oil to communist China. I was going to get to that. That's another thing that the Biden
administration...
administration...
But that's part of the sanctions you were talking about, right?
Well, that's another set of sanctions. So there's sanctions that was placed on Iran's oil production and the sale of Iranian oil.
And you're talking about the missile part.
Right. There was part of the sanctions regime that was placed on Iran during the Trump administration was to prevent Iran from being able to sell missiles and rockets and drones, weaponized drones. That's been relaxed to the point that Hamas has plenty of missiles and rockets and weaponized drones, and Hezbollah is sitting there in Lebanon on the northern border of Israel with over 100,000 to 150,000 rockets and missiles ready to rain down on civilian population centers throughout the state of Israel. So thank you very much, Democrats, for allowing Iran now to sell missiles and rockets and weaponized drones, because we have U.S. forces on the ground throughout the Middle East, and particularly Iraq and Syria, that have been attacked by Iranian militia groups and other proxies. The Houthis in Yemen, backed by Iran, have attacked U.S. forces in the Gulf. So what I'm in the Red Sea.
So the 2.5 years of the Biden administration, they've been able to move literally hundreds of thousands of rockets.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they've been able to rearm. So rockets and missiles that have been spent have been able, Iran has backed Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, the Party of God, sponsored by Iran, has had a tremendous amount of missiles and rockets pointed at Israel. But every time they use one, Iran's in a position to replenish what they've used up.
So obviously the sanctions haven't been enforced.
Exactly. So the sanctions have been relaxed. And then you mentioned oil. So Iran has been allowed, under the Democrat regime in Washington, to sell and expand its oil production and sales to countries like Communist China. Well, Communist China helps equip and fund Hamas and Islamic Jihad, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda moved its headquarters, for heaven's sakes, to Tehran, Iran. And they're a Sunni Shiite group, but they moved their headquarters to Iran. So Iran is able to spend money because it's making all this money on the sale of oil. It's particularly to Communist China, but other countries as well, and enrich other countries like Cuba in the Western Hemisphere, like Venezuela in the Western Hemisphere, which does what? Which endangers the United States of America and the free world. So, and then on top of that, the Biden administration has been using up our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the SPR reserve that we have, which is only supposed to be used in time of emergency. And here we are, the one country on the earth that produces some of the cleanest fossil fuels in the world. If you don't like the word fossil fuel, okay, oil, gas, and coal. We produce some of the cleanest in the world, and yet we're buying dirty, filthy. Why isn't every Democrat, why isn't every environmentalist in the United States of America not voting for Denice GaryPandol? Where are you? Because we're getting that dirty stuff from the Middle East and from other countries, and here we're the cleanest producer in the world. So, and then on top of that, those oil tankers are filthy. And think about this. It's not just environmental.
And create environmental impact, shipping
right.
everything
When
around
you
the world.
when Saudi Arabia and Iraq puts its fossil fuel supply on a dirty oil tanker and runs it down to California, number one,
not a drop of it falls in the ocean.
Right. That's just so clean and pure, right? Not only hurts the ocean, it hurts the air.
Those are electric boats, right? So there's no pollution.
Oh, right. They're electric, right. And then, but think about this. Think about how California is making our country vulnerable. We have, over 30 military bases here in California? The military, the United States military, over 80% of it runs on oil and gas and coal. Fossil fuels, right?
It doesn't move without it.
Right. How are we going to win the next war?
You're going to plug your Humvee into
right.
outlet somewhere in the battlefield?
Right. So when you're on the front lines fighting and you run out of charge, you're going to just somehow get some...
Time out. I need to charge my car.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So
they don't have time
think about the vulnerability. Think about the vulnerability that Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in California and the Democrats in Washington, D.C., think about how they're making vulnerable every California, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, independent, undeclared, they're making every one of us vulnerable. Because if we don't have enough oil and gas for the United States military and all of our bases here in California and we're attacked, we're sitting ducks. Now let me bring up another point. China's been building hypersonic ballistic missiles, and they've been planning them underground.
In China?
In China.
So they're intercontinental.
Right. I mean, we're talking WMDs, weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And think about that. And think about the fact that Iran, because of Biden and the Democrats in Washington, have also been allowed to further enrich their uranium. Well, you need uranium for a nuclear warhead. And you can stick a nuclear warhead on a missile, right? Mm-hmm. So, I see. So we have an intercontinental ballistic missiles available through China and other countries. But now, because of the Democrats that are running the show in Washington, D.C., Iran's being allowed to enrich its uranium, from what I understand from sources, above 60%. Think about that. And we don't know that. I don't know that exactly. How does anybody know, beyond any reasonable doubt, where that uranium enrichment is today?
In their process.
And right. And if they don't have nuclear warheads already available, North Korea has been funded by China. North Korea has been supported by Russia.
Okay,
North Korea has been building weapons of mass destruction. Look at Cuba. We had a Cuban missile.
North Korea is not that far from us.
Right. And look at Cuba. I mean, Russia put missiles and rockets focused here on our targeting targets here in the United States once upon a time in the 60s, not that long ago, in our lifetime. We have to look at the fact that Iran's footprint has been growing in South America, Central America, and Mexico. Look at those weapons, chemical weapons that China's providing the Mexican drug cartels every day. They're providing all those chemicals for those Mexican drug cartels to be able to make those pills we call fentanyl, right?
So
those
you're not
drugs.
talking about missiles now you're talking about
you
illicit
know,
drugs
I'm just
but it is
pivoting
chemical
everybody's
warfare, right?
Exactly. It's
So
part of war.
Let's talk about the southern border.
Okay.
How is the Biden administration affecting our safety? I think we know the answer because we've seen some of the problems as a result. But seeing what's going on in Israel, knowing that Hamas has got sleeper cells now in the United States, talk to us about the southern border.
Well, it's not just Hamas that has sleeper cells. Hezbollah, the party of God backed by Iran, that's basically taken over Lebanon.
So-called party.
Yeah, I mean, there are numerous terrorist groups that have sleeper cells here in California and the nation. And it's incredibly dangerous that the Biden team, which, by the way, I don't understand why he and the vice president and the leadership in the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and the DOJ aren't being impeached. I mean, the Constitution of the United States of America in Article 2, which deals with the executive branch. Mm-hmm. So Article 2 deals with the executive branch. I believe it's Article 2, Section 3. In the Constitution that points out that the president is supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer. Well, the chief law enforcement officer is supposed to uphold federal law. And Title 8, Section 1182 of federal law states that nobody's supposed to enter the United States of America without proper documentation. And without proper documentation, pointing out that they've absolutely committed no crime in their country of origin, that they're not going to be a ward of the state, that they're not going to take taxpayer dollars for transportation and housing and food and dental work and medical.
So here you've got Congress that's passed a law, and the executive
branch, which is responsible for law enforcement and upholding the law, is not doing so.
Per the Constitution.
Why aren't they impeached on that?
Oh, so now you bring up the I word. So if you in the Senate today and obviously the House has to deliver to you an indictment of impeachment and articles of impeachment, but would you vote for, let's say, the one dealing
Isn't that high crime? And wouldn't that fulfill, I believe it's Article 2, Section 4 of the constitutional law that says that we're supposed to hold the president, the vice president, and other civil officials accountable to federal law. Isn't that part of that high crimes and misdemeanor?
They're supposed to execute
the law.
The law.
That's their job, and to keep
they're not.
And to keep Americans safe. So let's see, if we have drug cartels, Mexican drug cartels, which are now controlling probably about 40% of the country of Mexico, which is on the verge of being a failed nation state on our border, that are believed to be able to outgun the Mexican army, by the way. So we've got that on our border. And here we are, we've got a governor and we've got people in our state that don't want to enforce the laws right here in California. You need a United States Senator by the name of Denice GaryPandol that's going to make sure that the laws get enforced. If I have to withhold funding from the state, if I have to withhold funding from district attorneys who are refusing to uphold and enforce the law, you have to be able to make crime illegal again, and that's closing the border. That's holding the president, that's holding the executive branch accountable for breaking the law, that's holding people that are involved in law enforcement accountable in leadership positions. And let's, if we could, can we talk about human trafficking for a moment?
That's part of the southern border.
I'm just thrilled that we were able to get here in the state of California, finally, after a lot of pressure was put on the Democrats, to make human trafficking, which is the slave trade, a felony. Well, that's beautiful. But we need to do more than that. Because when you sell a child into the sex slave trade or into forced labor,
and we're talking
children. We're
14-year-olds.
We're talking 10-year-olds. I mean, we're talking children that have been literally given to the Mexican drug cartels just so that the hope is they get to America. Well, they'll die in America if they're sold into slavery over and over again, several times a day, several times a week, several times a month. I mean, they either commit suicide or they die, because who can handle being raped multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and every month? I mean, children and people can't even process that emotionally and mentally and spiritually. It's a horrible thing. I think that we need to get legislation passed in the U.S. Senate and in the House that will make human traffickers not only suffer the penalty of a federal crime, but they need to have the death penalty applied. Because the death penalty should be applied to anybody that's buying and selling a human being, especially a child. It was the Republican Party that ended the horrific evil of slavery in America. The Democrats have brought it back. They brought it back in the 21st century under the Obama, well, not Obama, but the Biden administration. Most of the Obama people are in the Biden administration. Probably a lot of people know that. Yeah, it is. Under the Biden administration, and it's going to take Republicans in the United States Senate and Denice GaryPandol and Republicans in the House of Representatives to hold the executive branch responsible for this horror in our country, because it's going on in every state. We have Mexican drug cartels and criminal networks operating throughout our state and in every state of the union. It's going to take Republicans to bring law enforcement and accountability back to the United States of America and to the leadership in America.
So we've seen with all these indictments of Trump and all the other things, what is obvious it's no longer a level playing field, which the government should be providing. Instead, we've got a very uneven level.
Instead of equality under the law, we've
There's
got a two-tier justice system.
If anything, we've got a two-tier justice system. Give us an example of what you might do to help alleviate, eliminate, or try and make it more fair for all of us.
Well, it's extremely important that we hold our leadership accountable in the Department of Justice, in the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI. And as somebody that was very close to the double standards between people that are on the right as opposed to people on the left was made clear by my late fiance, Philip Haney. Perhaps you've read his book, See Something, Say Nothing. Philip Haney blew the whistle. Ted Cruz and other people in the United States Senate had an opportunity to get him before the United States Senate and give him an opportunity to testify to the abuses of the Obama-Biden administration. And this is a situation where Philip had top secret clearances, and I have had top secret clearances. And in fact, my advanced degree is in political science, international relations. My core field of study was the Middle East. So I'm well aware of the national security threats facing our country, facing Americans both here at home and overseas, as having had top secret clearances. Philip was too. And he had provided a tremendous amount of intelligence information on terrorists here in America. He had, for example, let the FBI know about the individuals that massacred Americans, Californians, in the San Bernardino massacre. That information was given to the FBI and they dropped the ball. Information on other terrorist attacks were given to the FBI. Philip was working for the Department of Homeland Security, but there was so much corruption. So we absolutely have to...
Now, corruption, like they're stealing money or they're just inept?
Corruption like they're choosing not to hold people accountable for breaking the law, or even going so far as to refuse to look at who has ties to criminal networks like Islamic terrorist groups or cells, because it's politically incorrect. In addition to that...
And they mean selective too, as far as
selective
who they do?
Investigation and selective prosecution.
Based on politically correct criteria rather than
ideology.
Okay.
Woke ideology, as opposed to let's just keep America safe and let's go after and investigate people that might have ties, or people we know have ties to either terrorist cells or terrorist groups or other kinds of criminal networks in America and overseas.
So...
Well, you have to do an investigation, and you have to be able to look at some basic criteria to understand who you need to further investigate and possibly get the FBI tracking that individual or those individuals, in addition to the fact...
They'd rather strip search grandma. What are you talking about?
Right, they'd rather strip search some poor elderly woman walking through the airport. It's ridiculous. So, it's... Let's get intelligent about our investigation in the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. We've really got to move away from political correctness, but also there's a lot of regulations and red tape involved in people that are involved in law enforcement and in investigations here in America, and that needs to be looked at too.
Unlevel playing fields, two-tier justice system. Do you get rid of the FBI?
You don't get rid of the FBI, but you're going to have to clean house, and you're going to have to start at the top.
You're assuming it's salvageable then?
Yes. I mean, we have FBI agents, on the ground that are going after those human traffickers, and they're getting up in the morning because they're absolutely dedicated and committed to pulling those people off the street and prosecuting them.
Weeding through that organization is be tough.
There's good people. But there's a lot of people around the top that need to be out. And these people that are going to play this game of political correctness need to be booted. We can't have that in law enforcement.
Yeah, you can't.
No. Your first priority is protecting.
We are a rule of law country.
We are, and it's not about personalities, and it's not about political correctness. It's about protecting the people of America. That is our first priority as an elected official. That's the president's #1 priority, is to protect the people of this nation that he sits atop of as the chief executive of the United States of America.
So you're elected to the Senate. What's the first bill you're going to co-author?
Well, one of the first bills I'd like to propose as I talk to the leadership in the United States Senate is to get water infrastructure, to protect and expand the fossil fuel industry, to focus on human trafficking and start getting the entire nation on board with
So
making
these
it.
are three
I
four
also want to
bills.
work on school choice.
Okay.
That parental bill of rights was passed in the House by Republicans. It was defeated by the Democrats in the Senate. Parents have a right to know what's going on in the schools of America. They have a right to know what the curriculum is and what's being taught to their children. And we have got to get a parental bill of rights passed in the U.S. Senate as they did in the House and make it law, make it the law of the land in America. We also need to look at the programs that are being operated by Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas and Governor Youngkin in Virginia.
Regarding school choice.
School choice, exactly. I mean, why shouldn't every child in America, regardless of their economic status, regardless of how much money their parents make or a parent makes every year, or a foster care parent makes,
I mean, the whole concept, right?
why shouldn't every child be able to get the very best education available in their city and state, despite their socioeconomic circumstances, despite their zip code? That sounds like equality under the law.
Where the money follows the child rather than the child following the money.
Right. I want that kind of choice and freedom available to children so they're not stuck in a bad neighborhood and in a failing school, but their parents' tax dollars don't have to go into one pot we call public school. I'm not saying to the unions, teacher unions of America, and to the public school systems of America, I'm not saying, let's close your, no, I'm not saying close your doors. I'm saying, let's have some competition.
They would be able to compete as well as anybody else,
Exactly,
right?
right? I mean, if parents think, that's a fabulous public school, we've got some great public school teachers, I want my child in that public school. Well, hallelujah. Great, have your children or child in that public school. And if another parent's over here and says, I have a special needs child, I'd like to put my special needs child in a school that's devoted and dedicated to special needs children, that parent could put their child there. You have some parents over here and they want their child in a parochial school, maybe a Jewish school or a Christian school. So be it. Let the tax dollars follow the child's education. Give parents the right to make a choice, hopefully the very best choice for their children.
I like it. So
Thank
tell
you.
me, how does Denice Gary-Pandol win?
Denice Gary-Pandol is going to win when people that listen to your show say to their family members and friends that are Democrats and liberals, say, Denice wants to make California affordable again in the nation. She wants to lower food prices, and one of the ways she's going to do that is get rid of these bureaucracies and mandate water infrastructure. She's going to get the price of gasoline at the pump back down to $20 to fill up your car, because she cares about the working class. She wants a permanent middle class tax cut. She wants to cut spending. She wants to deregulate the economy. She wants to end the mountain of paperwork by small businesses and cut the taxes to small businesses and make California a pro-business, business-friendly state again. She wants to make California great again and help the people of this state and help the people of this country.
So if somebody wants to get involved in your campaign, how do they do it?
DeniceGaryPandol.com. Denice, D-E-N-I-C-E, Gary, G-A-R-Y, Pandol, P-A-N-D-O-L.com. Make a contribution. I need to buy airtime on radio and television. We want to get this message out, not just to Republicans. This is a common sense message for a Democrat, for a Republican, and anybody in between. It's common sense. It's driven by a desire to help the people of our state and our country have economic growth and prosperity, security in our neighborhoods, making crime illegal again in our state and in our nation, enforcing the law, holding people in positions of authority accountable, and moving our nation forward on a path of safety and security.
Well, thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
us.
Thank you so much, Scott,
I
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Thank you.
And good luck with your campaign.
Thank you. Appreciate it.